Today is February 21st, Friday, and we have Uncle Pete again. Why again? Because. There
Really?
you go, Pete. Yep.
Just because.
Just because.
All right. So today we're
because the people voted.
today we're going to talk about the query builder a little bit and some pull apart one of my more advanced queries and look at how I built it in the query builder. And it's kind of surprising that I'm even doing this topic because the first 18 months that I used WinDev, I probably didn't use the query editor once. I came from the SQL world and said why I need all that. I just write SQL statements and go on about my life. And slowly but surely, some folks held me down, poured a little Koolaid down my throat, kind of got a taste for it, and now I've kind of gone full circle. I still have my SQL and pull it out when I need it, but I only do it when I absolutely need it now. I use the standard HYperFile statements as much as possible, HReadSeek, HModify, and so forth, and then I build as many of the queries as I can in the query builder. So why did I make the change and move over? There's a lot of reasons, but the main reason is that because I do so much mentoring and helping out on other folks' projects, things like that, it's much easier for others to read my code when it's in standard HFile statements. A lot of the mentoring clients I have are either new to programming or new to WinDev, so they don't have that same level of experience with SQL and different languages and so forth. So by doing everything in standard HyperFile statements, even if you don't know W language, it's not hard to figure out what HReadSeek first is going to do. So the code's just more readable. On top of that, the queries themselves are so easy to consume by table controls and combo controls and reports and things like that, that it becomes very easy to do those things. And now the app's more maintainable because if I've got a query that I use for product types and we come up with some kind of new criteria that needs to be filtered on, all I do is adjust that query. Everything that consumes that query now has that additional criteria in it. So you've got that layer of extraction and maintainability that we strive to achieve. So that's a couple of the reasons why I've slowly but surely came around. And it's not all milk and honey. The query editor cannot handle super advanced queries. I can still write statements that will absolutely blow it out of its mind, but it can handle, as we're going to see today, it can handle some complex things. You have to be careful, just like you will do with any other tool. You can definitely create a query that doesn't perform well if you don't know and understand what you're doing. So it's a tool, not a silver bullet like anything else. Like I said, I still use HExecuteSQLQuery every once in a while, just not as often as I used to have to use it. So let's take a look at one example of a fairly complex query that I needed for a project. We're looking at the lab driver project here, and this is a list of medical studies that are going on, and studies can be linked to the centers that will be performing that study. 90% of the studies are only linked to one center, but occasionally they'll use multiple centers for that study. Well, the requirement for this screen was that because most of the time you're only going to have one center, it'd be nice to see that name on the table. But if there's multiple centers, we actually just show multiple centers, and then when you get into the actual editing of that study, you can see all the centers configured. And then the last thing it does is it has a if there's no centers at all linked to the study, then we show no centers linked. So there's a couple of different ways that we could accomplish that. You know, a lot of developers' first response to that would be, okay, in the row display logic, put some code in there to figure out and populate this center column. Well, that would work, but as soon as you get a couple hundred studies in your table, the performance is going to be horrible with that solution because you're doing all that extra reading with every row of data. So that's not a good approach performance-wise or maintainability-wise. My first instinct was to pull out good old SQL and write some crazy SQL statement that me, Andy Stapleton, and a couple other people in the world might be able to actually decipher and ever read. Again, that's not the greatest thing for maintainability either. So I took me another big old swag of Koolaid and said, can I do this in the query editor? And believe it or not, I managed to get it done. So let's switch over now and look at the query here. Here is the query that this table is displaying. There's two tables involved. Price tables in here simply because we're looking up name of the price code, but it's really nothing elaborate to that at all. The two tables that we're really concerned with is study spec, which is the actual study, and then there's a table called study center that is the cross-reference between studies and centers. That's how we can configure multiple centers for a study. There's one record in study center for every center configured for that study. But if we look at my query here, the tables I've got are study spec and query study center count. What is query study center count? Well, one of the beautiful things about the query builder editor is you can consume queries within queries. Now, like I said, you know, there's caveats to everything. You want to make bad performing queries, start consuming queries inside queries. You have to be very careful about how you do that and when you do that. This is a particular instance where it works well, but you can also make instances that don't work well also. So just be careful and be aware. You know, this isn't a magic bullet that's going to let you do anything you want and query any crazy way you want. you still have to be very cognitive of how your database is structured and what your indexes are and what you're filtering on and all those normal things that you need to be aware of. So let's pick this thing apart. So we'll start with how this query study center count is built first. And it's right over here is my completed one, but what we're going to do today is we're actually going to build this thing from scratch again. So let's come up here and we're going to do a new query. It's select query. Here's where you would give the query a name. For now, we're just going to stay with what we've got. And we start out by dropping down over here, and we want to find the study center table because that's the table that we're wanting to work on to get how many centers are in each study. So we look for study center. And the first field we want to come over here is study center ID. So we click on study center ID, use the right arrow to move it over. Now, on that, we actually want to do a count. The reason that we want to do a count on that is once we get done with this query, we're going to group it by study. So we're really just using study center ID as a holding place so that we can count the number of records in each group. So by putting a count on study center ID, we can get that count. So we choose the count button and count on the selected item. And we can just say OK. Now, at the bottom, notice that it named it count 1. Well, that's not very useful to me, so I'm going to pull that up and rename that to center count so that it becomes a column name that makes a little more sense to me. Okay, next field that we're going to add is study spec ID right here. Now that one we don't need to do anything with because that is the one that we want to group by. And then the final field that we need is center name out of the center table. Now center name, if you notice down here at the bottom, right now it says will be used to group the calculation elements. What it is telling us is anything that's not in an aggregate function will be part of the group by clause. And this is where, even though you can use the query editor and build queries without ever knowing SQL, learning a little SQL will go a long ways to improving how you write your queries. And you don't have to get super advanced with it. One of the SQL for Dummies or SQL in 30-day books will give you that foundation you need to just make better use of the query builder. So what this is telling me is right now, I would get a different record for every center name. Well, that's of no use to me because I want to know how many, I want one record for each study with the number of centers in that study. So what I need to do instead is wrap that with an aggregate function so that it isn't part of the group by. It's a string field, so I can't do a count on it or something like that or an average. So what I'm going to do instead is do a max. We could do min as well. I just always tend to use max. And then once again, I'm going to rename that to just be center name. So what does that do for me? Okay, so now here's what happens. If we notice study spec doesn't have any aggregate function on it, so now it is used to group the calculations, which means I'm going to have one row for every study spec ID. In other words, one row for every study. In that row, I will have a count of the number of records in the table. So this is my study center cross-reference table, so that's going to give me a count of how many centers are linked to this study. And then max center name is going to give me the alphabetically highest, you know, if there was zoo center, that would be the center name I see of the centers for this study. That's the highest alphabetical name. I don't care about that if there's multiple centers, because I'm going to display the words multiple centers as we saw in our table control. But the magic of that is if we only have one center, well, the max and min are both going to be the same value because there's only one center. So we get that one center name for this study in that center name field. And when we go over and build the other query, we're going to see how we use that. So what we're going to get right now, and we can actually save this now. We're done building it. So we click OK. Now, you often will get these messages, and it depends on how well you structured your analysis, whether you do or don't. What that's saying is it doesn't know the proper way to join the study center and the center tables. So, and we see here it's doing a Cartesian join there. So instead we double click on it and we do an add, and we really want to link it by center ID and study center ID. So now all we've done is tell it how to make that link. And as soon as that saves,
Wow, I don't know of anybody else, but man, this is giving me a headache.
everything gives you a headache.
Hey, is everybody following this, or is it lack of sleep is killing me on it? I mean, I know you're going slow and all that, and you're explaining it.
He's explaining it
is
nicely. I
everybody
think
getting?
you haven't woken up yet, Arnold.
Yeah, I think it's lack of sleep, but I mean, it sounds really impressive.
It's lack of sleep and overuse of the improper tool.
Oh, you're hurting me now. I'm going back to mute and back to sleep.
So now let's take a look at the results of this query. That's another nice thing about the query builder, is you can actually test the query standalone. So if we run this query, and this is taking a little longer than normal because this database actually lives in the UK. So it takes a little while to initialize. And we see that for every study, we've got a count. There's only one study, or one center for study 30, and that center is Children International. There's 2 studies for studies 9 and 2. So again, it shows the maximum center name over here, but it means nothing to us because there's multiple centers over there. And we're going to see when we build the second query what we do about that. But you see that we're getting a count of the number of centers for each study. Now remember, when we looked at the table, there's 2 centers down here, or 2 studies down here that don't have any centers at all. Well, those centers, or those studies rather, aren't included in this list. I'd ask Arnold why that is, but we already know he's struggling a little this morning, so I'll answer for him. Remember, we base this query on the study center table, which is a list of centers for each study. So if there are no centers configured for the study, there won't be any records in there. Therefore, it would never be included in the query. So we're actually not seeing, you know, a record with a 0 count here. We don't get any record at all because there's no data for it to generate that record from. And we'll see how we handle that in our other queries so that we get those ones that don't have a count. So at this point, we've built our count query. Now all we need to do is build the other query, which is the big query. So once again, I'm just going to start with a new query. And let me catch up in my notes. And this time we're going to start with the study spec table. And we're just going to add a few fields in here just so you can get an idea of it. There's no need to add everything. We do need to add the price table ID. Okay, so there's a few fields from the study. The next thing we need to do is we need to add the price table name from the price table. That's pretty simple, just normal lookup type thing. And then the last thing we need to do is add our query count. And this is one of those cool things, you know, along with our database tables, this includes our queries so that we can add them. So we'll use the query study center count, and we just want to include center count in our query. So now at this point we have some fields from study. We're doing that lookup of the price table name, and we're getting the count of the number of studies. Or I'm sorry, the count of the number of centers for that study. But we still haven't done that column that says this is the actual center name, or says multiple centers, or no centers linked. So how do we do that? Well, we do that by creating a new calculated item. It's basically a formula. A lot of you have used Access. You know, it's a formula. So we create a new calculated item. We're going to call that center name. And we're going to use an SQL case statement to create this thing. And the talk today is not about teaching you SQL statements and so forth. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the syntax and structure of the case statement. It's similar to a W language switch statement. It's a standard SQL construct, and you know you'll be able to follow along pretty close. The confusing thing is, and it still gets me every day, is it starts with case, which is equivalent to the W language word switch. In W language, you use switch, and then your ofs are the case keyword. Most languages, the statement is case and when. So that's one of those ones that gets me every time I write a statement in W language. I try to start with the word case instead of the word switch. But we're going to do case, and then we're going to back to our count table, our count query. So we're going to do case query study center count. So we're going to say, this is equivalent of switch on count. And now's when the statement gets just a little different. Then we do when one, then, and we want the center name. So that, if you're familiar with W language, that would be switch count, case one, and then the actual code that we would do. So what this is going to do from a SQL standpoint is if center count is 1, then this calculated variable center name is going to contain that center name from that query. So this is where our whole using max on center name comes in. If there's only one center, we're going to use that center name from that query that we did the max on center name for and display that in the column name. Okay.
Oh man, you know what? This is so easy. I got this figured where you're headed anyway. So.
All right.
You can
I knew
stop
you'd
now.
get there. Yeah. You want to take over?
I could, but you know what? I just I'm going mute.
Wow. Okay, our next when statement is when null, then no centers linked. This one gets a little more complicated, and you have to understand a little more about SQL to understand what this one is doing. It's not zero. A lot of folks that when they first start working with SQL think that this should be 0. But remember when we ran that test of our count query, there weren't any rows in there for our studies that didn't have any centers. Well, when we join that table together with our study table, we're not going to get a value. And SQL doesn't put 0 in there. If it doesn't find a record, it's going to put 0 in there. Or I'm sorry, it's going to put null in there. It's not going to put 0 in there.
Well, it doesn't put it. It just remains null, right?
True.
It doesn't
True.
necessarily put null.
Right.
It just remains.
Yeah. Because
like
there is no
or something.
Right. Yeah. Null means unknown. So by testing for null, we know that if that count has null in it, we didn't find a record in our study center count query, then we want to put no centers linked is what we want to return from our calculated function. So now if there's one center, we're going to get its name. If there's no centers, we're going to get no centers linked. And then our final one, we're going to do else. Multiple centers. And then an end. That's the end for the case. So So, we have three possible situations. We have one center, no centers, or multiple centers. So now our calculated item center name has that calculation. When we click OK here, it's now added to our query. And we could go back in and edit it by double clicking, and it would pull it back up so that we could edit it. And there is a little bit of help here for you if you're not familiar with SQL functions, and you can incorporate some W language functions into your calculated functions as well. Okay, so now we've got our center name that we were going for. So now let's go ahead and save this query. Okay, again, we got that message about it didn't know how to do a join. And when we see the query, we see this Cartesian that's telling us it didn't do that join properly. So we double click on it, we add it, and we want to link our query study center count study spec ID to study spec ID. But now there's one other important thing we need to do here. We need to check that we want to include the records from price table and study spec that do not have a query study center count. If you're familiar with SQL, what we're doing is saying whether we want an inner join or an outer join. An inner join is what it does by default, and that means that if there's not a record in both tables, don't give me anything. So with this turned off, we would not see those two studies that don't have any centers. With this turned on, it turns into an outer join, and now we're going to get the study record, and the fields from the query count are going to be null. And now you see how we are calculated field, because by turning that checkbox on, we're going to get a study record. The query records are going to be null. So now that count has null in it, and we can return no centers configured. Now we click OK. Now one other thing that we need to do is I happen to know that not every study spec actually has a price table ID configured. So we need to do the same thing, and we need to turn that into an outer join as well, except we want to do that. So we want to get study spec whether or not it finds a price table.
So those are outer joins.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if you see the
the colored,
the little graphic actually shows you it's a right outer join, left outer join. If they're both white, it's an inner join. And the Cartesian actually shows as an X, meaning there is no join. It doesn't know what the heck to do with it. All right, so now let's save that and run our test on this one.
Sure handy to see that graphically. Is it going to work?
It takes it a little while because of the UK database. All right, we run it. And now there's our studies, and we're seeing the word multiple center, no centers linked, and for the one that only has one, we're seeing the actual name of that center. So we've achieved exactly what our requirements were. To reinforce how that join works, let me turn that off. And now if we run this query, see, we didn't get those two that say no center link, because by not having that set to an outer join, it completely ignored those studies because it didn't find a link in the other table. Makes sense?
That's
Yeah,
becoming
well,
an InterJoin.
I'm sorry?
InterJoin.
Yeah. It's now an InterJoin, and we can actually look SQL code. It does an InterJoin. Now, if I go back and do that, and then look at the SQL code, now it's an outer join.
Isn't that one
I
supposed
can
to be
see.
right out join?
Yeah, for some weird reason, they always seem to pick the wrong table as the first table. You see, they start with price table and do a right outer join to study spec. If I was writing this by hand, I would start with study spec and do a left outer join to price table. It seems like when you do them in the query builder, it always does them the opposite way. It really doesn't matter. It's just, to me, when I look at the SQL, it's a little harder to read. And to be honest with you, I showed you doing all of this, but most of the time I just come over here, write the query, and then do that, which is really cool, because what that also means is when someone like me or Andy sends you a SQL query, you can come put it in over here and reverse engineer it. Now, that doesn't always work. If you get a real fancy SQL statement, it's not going to be able to reverse engineer it.
Yeah, then it could be a problem.
Yeah, and me and Glenn have talked about when you can't reverse engineer it, you can still use those queries. And there seems to be like two levels to those queries. Some of them you can still use just like you would any other query, and others you can't use in reports and so forth. And it's like the level. Some of them it can't reverse engineer, but it still shows like the list of fields that it's producing. Those you can still use in tables and reports. But the ones that it just absolutely, if there's a word in there that it can't parse and recognize, it kind of just throws its hands up in the air and waves them all around like it just don't care. And when it does that, then you can't use it in a table or anything because it doesn't have a field list for you to link to.
Yeah. Okay. Can I make two
observations? Yeah, there's like two different levels to the ones that it can't parse.
Just two things. I just want to just clarify with you. When you start using that case statement, which is quite nice, but if you're having a multi-language app, how would you translate that to other languages?
Oh yeah, that is, and this is a multi-language app, and that is an issue. It's one that we're just living with there because it's
at the moment.
It's that not that big of a translation.
Issue at the moment. Okay.
But yeah, if you're doing multi-language, I don't know that you could. I don't think that there's any way to do the whole string translate.
Okay. I just thought maybe you had found the solution already.
No. That's one where you might have to do it outside the code.
Okay. Then the other observation I would like to mention is, remember where you showed the different SQL statements versus W language functions? There you go. Just a word of advice maybe. If you want to use different SQL backends, stick to the SQL statements, which allows you to swap out to different ones. If you start adding in W language ones, you might just get stuck with the HyperFile only. Am I correct in saying that?
I'm not really sure how the W language functions get incorporated in, because these are true. These aren't HyperFile statements at all. These are actual W language functions.
That's
So
what I'm saying.
I don't think that they have anything to do with the back end at all. I think they're taking place on the client. So I mean, they're truly running W language functions, not HyperFile functions. What it does mean is don't do things here that are filtering records, because it's not taking place on the server. It's taking place on the client.
Okay, all right. No, just wanted this. I thought as much. So if you want to be able to swap out from, say, example, one SQL database like Postgres to Microsoft, it's best to try and stick to the SQL statements instead of using the W language ones.
I actually don't think that it matters at all when you're writing in the query builder, because again, these queries are encapsulated above the database at all. You know, I'm pretty sure that query, as long as you're using these statements, and these aren't all the SQL statements by any means, but these are the ones that they know how to translate. But if you're using W language functions, I really have no idea what that's going to do to you, because obviously that doesn't take place at the server at all. So I don't know if it's still able to do those if you use a different backend or not. I haven't found a need to use the W language functions in the queries, you know, partly because I know SQL so well.
To future-proof your capability of swapping out the SQL backend.
Right.
And I was just thinking when I was using it, that if you start using W language, which sometimes I'm tempted, but I'm not, because I'm thinking it will break the back end if you do swap the SQL.
Yeah, I'm not sure. You'd have to test that. I kind of think they may work, like I said, because I'm pretty sure those take place on the client anyway. They're not taking place on the database server at all.
Oh, they know. Okay, that's really interesting. Okay, thought I'll just bring it up just to see what your thoughts on that are. Okay.
Any other questions?
Hey, Pete. So So in Pete's real world, you wouldn't have any queries in here at all, right?
No, this is Pete's real world. This is.
So you would really actually build all these queries to be used.
Yeah, this
so
is.
You wouldn't go in
the
back
real
end
world.
and take.
You know, again, it depends on the project, and you know, like I said at the beginning, one of the reasons that I do this now is folks that know WinDev can understand this. You know, like you said, seeing that graphically sure helps. You know, the way I used to write apps, this is what you would see. You know, the number of developers that can understand that are far fewer than the number of developers that can understand this.
Yeah, but if you explain somebody the other one, so whatever this query editor can handle, you probably could. It's not the real crazy ones, right? I mean, it handles more generic stuff, so that if you ever
I mean, The super crazy ones it still can't handle.
Yeah.
I throw in a couple of any clauses and a having clause and a few other things, and pretty soon it ain't gonna be able to handle it. But as you saw here, this is far from select asterisk from table, and it handled it fine. But yeah, I am doing as much in the query builder as I can, for the simple fact of it makes the app more usable. Now, maybe what you're talking about are database views, and if there are some complex relationships that I really want to make sure they get handled properly, I'll probably create that as a database view in the backend database. And now, as far as the developer is concerned, they don't know the difference between that and any other database table.
I guess that's right.
That's kind of a different thing.
That's not a query, that's a view. Yeah, okay.
But yeah, what these queries are is most of the tables, most of the combo boxes in this app are using these queries.
Yeah, I got to get my head around it. My head's still in TPS, so. So anybody else have more questions for the Pete?
You can use views and table value functions from SQL and Query Builder. I'm not sure, Terry, and I know that to do that with SQL, you have to have and I know you do, you have to have the SQL Server driver to use the views and table value functions. I don't know about them at all. That I'm not sure if they would handle those or not. I've never really tried. I don't do a lot of SQL Server development these days. Thank God. I can't afford it.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Sure there are, but I don't see any. Oh, what? Terry might have another one.
I have a little show and tell I want to do after we wrap this up.
Okay.
What I was doing up at 3 in the morning.
Yeah, what were you doing?
Yeah, the reverse engineering is neat. Well, I was working on the Theology website, and just kind of want to show you.
So we can keep the recording going, right?
Sure.
Okay.
I just want to show you how dynamic and rich of an interface that we were able to do in WebDev. This is obviously a live website, and this is the dashboard. Teamology is a customer and team member satisfaction survey and analytics platform is what it is. And if we start this thing, we choose a company. That change unless we change one, I guess. All right, so we choose a company, and then we choose the dashboard for that company, and then we select a view. So here's their standard monthly dashboard view. The overall ratings and so forth. The trending graph isn't showing any data right now because we only have 1 week worth of data in here, and that's the reason we don't have any previous columns here. But now, one of the things that we can do is these are some attributes in the data. We know whether they're residential or commercial. We know whether the job was over 5,000 or under 5,000. So, and notice these are links. So now if I click on commercial, Did you pick up all the things that just happened to that screen? First of all, we filtered the data based on the customer type of commercial. There's a looper up here that you didn't see before that now shows us that we have a filter type of customer type equals commercial. The customer type graph disappeared because it's no longer relevant since we're now filtering down to one customer type. The transaction amount graph moved over to take the customer type's position. And now we can also filter on the over 5,000. That one, I've got a little goofiness going in there with spacing every once in a while that I'm still trying to figure out. Now, I filtered on customer type of residential and transaction amount over 5,000. Now, our bottom section disappeared altogether because we've now filtered out down to individual attributes, so there are no available attributes left to filter on. But now I can delete one of those filters, and now it pops back up. The graphs and everything have recalculated, and you can't tell, but this thing is purely dynamically driven. All these attributes, the customer type names, the values is all configuration and database driven. The only thing my application actually knows is that there are 10 of them, and I only have 4 configured right now. But as you see, they're just attribute name, and there's a little bit of indirection going on in the code. I'm using a little bit of indirection to determine which chart name the values go in, so that as I hide one, everything shifts over. And you know, there's the looper that's showing those values below. There's the looper up there with the filters. So yeah, I mean, it's amazing, you know, how much of this screen is dynamic and being driven, you know, by logic with WebDev. Yeah, this, you know, a year or two ago, it'd been a challenge to do this much with a Windows application, much less a web application.
It's beautiful.
And then we're also generating a report based on that. We're handing off the values of whatever our filtering is and popping up the PDF report.
I understand that new version 19, they've got a nice lot of new functionality to help you to create dashboards.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's all Windows based, though.
Oh, okay. Not for WebDev.
Yeah, yeah. I was real excited until I found out that it was all just for WinDev.
I'm sure it will come.
Yeah, exactly. But of course, by the time it does, I will have already built my own. But not the first time that's happened.
Yeah. So, if you guys want to have another tip, then
hey, Wolfgang has something to show when you get done with this.
Perfect.
I can use Pete's screen. He just has to follow instructions.
Well, see, now we're already pushing our luck then. Yes, what you need me to do?
Yeah, I'd like to see you push, Pete.
Now, this is where, seeing that you got this one over on your display here, I've been busy with some mobile development, and you get to a point where you wonder if your
screen is displaying correctly for different tablets and phones and things like that.
Okay, I saw your blurb the other day on this, and I didn't understand what you were talking about. So,
okay,
cool.
so let's go through that and give you a good idea. Chrome, I don't know if you guys know, since Chrome version 32 came out, it's got a nice development environment to help guys who want to develop mobile devices to see how their websites look like in different different phones and tablets and stuff like that. So what you do is you go to Tools, or you push F12, but there it is, Developer Tools. Go to Developer Tools, or you push F12, one of the two.
Okay.
Control-Shift-I.
Oh, and developer tools.
Or
Okay.
F12, or F12, it doesn't matter. Then go to the cog symbol there on the top corner, right corner of there. Go to the top cog symbol. Then let me just go down to, what was it again? You'll
I'm
see
surprised you're working with Chrome.
overrides.
We're having problems.
Is it overrides? Just go to overrides.
No, I always use Chrome, Arnold.
No, with Adobe Connect, we always had problems
Yeah,
earlier.
no, I always use Chrome.
Yeah.
No, Chrome works.
Overrides,
really
there
well.
we go.
Okay. When you go to overrides,
I'm there.
and then tick the box show emulation. Okay. And then you close it up. Then hit the escape button. No, not yet.
Whoa.
Hit the escape symbol next to the cog. Escape symbol next to the left of the cog.
I guess I don't know what the escape symbol is.
Wait. Are you saying that little
Are you saying that?
The one with the arrow on the left side of the cog?
That's it. Left side of the cog.
Left of the cog. Left.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hit that. Not that one. That one. Yes. Click that one. All right.
Okay.
Then what happens is then you find. Okay, hold on. Let me just resize my screen. Click on the emulation tab.
Emulation. Okay.
Then you've got a drop-down list of all the popular tablets, phones, etc. Click on one of them. And then you can,
so you can see what it looks like.
Yeah, now hit the emulate button. And there you go. That's how it will look like in Apple iPhone 4. And then hover with your mouse over it. You've got the simulation of swiping and everything. Scroll up and down, pull it up and down as you would. And if it doesn't work here, there's a good chance it won't work in iPhone 4.
Well, that one doesn't have scrolling anyway because it all fit in.
Yeah. So anything that doesn't work, apparently it's like 95 to 98%. It will work the same way as if you got it.
Now, is this Chrome browser on the iPhone or the native iPhone browser that they're emulating?
Now, what they're doing is, what I understand from Chrome is, they've written the engine around to emulate all these different platforms, or the phones, and etc. So what happens is, if you run it, it's kind of picking up the resolution. You can even, as an example, if you go down the bottom, you can actually add in your own new viewport, as they call it, with a resolution, what colors, is it touch sensitive, has it got the, whatever, and you can then emulate it as close as possible to that. But if you use the default ones over here, I've noticed so far, like example, if I put my Samsung 4, some things which don't work on the Samsung 4, it doesn't work on here either. Yet if you go to the Apple one, it works. So it's so far I found it very, very close to what the real device will do is what will happen in this browser. So instead of loading it up onto the different devices, you quickly test it out here.
Yeah, I've actually could have used that last week because we were having a problem. The rating control apparently does not work in the mobile devices, and My problem was I actually had to do any testing, I had to make changes and publish it so that I could test it on a mobile device.
Yeah. This works very well with mobile devices also. And what's nice about it is that if you want to mess around and look at it, you can go here and you've got all the source code and you can muck around like any other.
Yeah, the Chrome developer tools are yeah, I've been able to reverse engineer and figure out a lot of things about what WebDev's doing and how to make it do what I wanted to do by using the Chrome developer tools to figure out what the heck it's doing.
Yeah, and this is since version 32. So guys, if you don't find it there on your Chrome, just upgrade it to 32 or later.
Very cool. Now that does not
and I found that
if
it doesn't work
here,
a webinar. There's a good chance it doesn't work. Sorry?
I said this does not get you off the hook for doing a webinar. You still owe us a webinar.
Yeah, I know. We have to get to the next one. We'll definitely get there next month. Still been quite hectic.
That's pretty cool.
But we'll get to it. And I found that works really well. The things that didn't work on my, because I've got an iPhone and I've got a Samsung S4 and a tablet and Asus tablet. And I tell you what, it emulates very, very close. The issues I had was the Samsung S4, it showed up here. Which eventually I didn't bother to load it up to the S4 anymore. I just tested it on here, and once it worked quite well, fairly well here, then I'd bother to test it on the actual device.
Okay, let's see. This is exactly what I'm having. This control does not work on the mobile platform, so let's see what happens here.
There you
go. Let's see. Tools.
F12. It's easier. I just push F12.
And then
Pete, try go back on and try to hit F12 and see if that works.
I'm sure it will. It's just a keyboard shortcut.
Yeah, but it doesn't show that shortcut. But what he's saying,
F12 and F12 to get out again if you want to.
And now let's choose an iPhone 4. Emulate. Now see that control actually does not work on the devices.
Is it in this case?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. There's one or two things that didn't work with me on the S4 didn't work on here either.
Yeah.
And I reckon it's about 98% accurate.
You know what I've had to do is actually go to a standard radio button. Yeah. Now you see when I did a refresh, it sensed, and that's cool. It sensed that I'm now in mobile, and this was my solution. Is I've written the code now where I use a standard radio button.
Oh, by the way, if you don't refresh, it doesn't pick up. You see where it says user agent.
Right.
You can also then go down, and if you want to know what iPhone 4 sets as a user agent, click on the user agent. It'll tell you what it sends to your app. So you can do a case statement in Windows, in web development, saying, hey, if you get this particular platform, do this.
Right. Yeah. And that's exactly what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Let's look at that page real quick.
You pick up mobile.
What I do is I test for a browser platform and say is it mobile or not, and then I determine which control I'm going to display based on whether it's mobile or not.
That's what I was talking. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, exactly. So you can use the Chrome to emulate different platforms.
So unfortunately, since I've done this coding, we can't fully test to see if it does. Or we can do this real quick though.
Oh, okay.
We don't want that one. We want that one.
Just
All
stay.
right. So now it'll force the.
Issue.
All right. Now we come over here. Refresh again. Oh, that's going to that's the web.
You have to go to your localized, isn't it?
Yeah. Let's see. We have to do it this way.
Yeah, run it from there. You have to hit F12 again and go to the emulation first.
Yeah, actually, I just wanted that. It's what I wanted. Go with this. I have trouble sometimes with AWP engine running locally. It sometimes doesn't want to test out pages. It's weird.
I've also picked it up, but when I kind of...
Yeah, it's like when you run it the second time, all of a sudden it'll run.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm glad to know it's not just me. Unfortunately, this one's pretty complicated because of the parameters and stuff, and sometimes I just can't get it to run. Yeah, see, there we go. We got the...
There you go. I don't know why it does it. Once or twice I've had it. Not always, but once in a blue moon it does. And I just go exit right out and then come back in again.
Yeah, I've had to sometimes shutting down the web dev server over here solves it.
Yeah.
And occasionally I've had to reboot to solve it, and you know, when I really need it, nothing seems to solve it. It's kind of one of those deals.
Oh.
Yeah, and today seems to be one of those days where it just doesn't want to.
Right. I hope that helps. But there you go.
Yeah, that's very cool. Let's see if
Chrome.
What's quite nice about it, through the list, you also get a good idea because Chrome seems to keep the most popular devices on there. So you get a bit of an idea. It's cooking. Okay.
that worked that time. Oh.
Oh, come on.
No, not going to work.
Maybe you should use Chrome then.
It's got nothing to do with Chrome. It's got to do with, see, this site is, most of the site's dynamic. A few pages are AWP because they run standalone. It's a hybrid site that, PC Soft really doesn't even tell you can do. And it works well, but makes it a challenge sometimes to test. I think that was the only change I made. Yeah.
Doesn't want to go nowhere.
Oh well. Yeah. It'd be interesting to see if that does or doesn't work. But yeah, that rating control, which, by the way, that rating control is on my list of topics that you can vote on. The standard rating control only has 5 faces, and if you noticed, I have 11 faces on mine, and I figured out how to do that, how to modify the rating images so that you can do the custom graphics with them and stuff.
Nice.
And would you believe that in our beta testing, we've already had 3 people that didn't understand how to fill this out?
That's confusing.
You know, there's some people that you just can't help, you know?
How long have you been rating stuff around?
The rating control?
Yeah, how long has it been around on the internet?
The
Facebook
rating
around?
control itself been around? Yeah, I don't know, but they just couldn't figure out how to click on a radio button. Period. One of them actually did this. They did. They put the number in their comment.
Oh boy.
I mean, you know, try, but yeah, you know, everything works fine right up until you know,
Maybe
let the
you
world
gotta
involve.
put in parentheses after the question mark. Click on the face that matches your feelings.
Yeah. Well, what I do now is if you don't click on one of these, I just pop up a message that says you're too stupid to take this survey.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Take it away.
Oops.
I go with the user-friendly approach.
That's pretty friendly.
Okay. Good day, guys. Hopefully we learned a lot today. That was a cool tip.
Early in the morning. Emulate. Okay, anything else? Otherwise, Uncle Pete's going to go to work. Create more voting
no,
items.
Uncle Pete's going to go to bed. Uncle Pete's going to go to bed.
Sounds like you've been all night up.
Yeah.
He's pretty much.
Not together.
When I went to bed. No, never. Count on it. Okay, so
I took a nap at like 9 o'clock last night.
Oh.
All right, so who's next week, Arnold?
I don't know. You know, I'll let Tim help us get somebody going because we had a number of people.
Yeah, I know.
Brian,
he said he had a couple.
Sometime.
Yeah, I have a couple I'm working on.
Yeah. And then Brian said you would do one
weekend,
eventually. So. Okay, cool. We'll get somebody, and if not, we don't want to bug you on another Wednesday night. Yeah, put one together. Let somebody else do one.
Yeah, I definitely won't be doing one next week.
Yep, you're only twice a month, first and third.
Is that the plan?
Unless other people are talking, unless people are kicking in, then.
Sounds good.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Again. That was wonderful. Great. Take care. Stopping the recording now.
Have a great weekend. Cheers.